Welcome to the Atlas Sidewalk Sale. We're playing 20 questions with
Michael Hammer. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for doing this.
This is such a celebration this week in Chicago at the Atlas Pen Fair. The thing about it is there are always a lot of questions about buying pens and buying inks, and before getting into it, I would just like to say, look at the environment in this store and consider that all the people here have a consciousness. And the consciousness is to grow the community, but one person at a time. And although people have choices when they're buying pens, and there are a lot of choices online, I'd like to preface my remarks by talking about the online sellers, which are valuable to people all over the country or countries that might not have a good pen dealer in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I would always caution people to consider buying pens online from companies that are invested in the industry by having inventory. There are people, there are companies in this industry that don't have inventory, and they show the latest things, and you can reserve something, but it's not, all reservations not the same. And as a consequence, what they're doing is working with the customer's money, and they're not fully committed to keeping it in stock all the time. That's not to say that you should not buy online. There are many online dealers that are heavily invested in inventory and in supporting consumers, supporting pen lovers, developing pen lovers by not only the inventory that they keep, but the relationships they have with their employees and the relationships they have with the industry. And that's where you should buy your pens. So to the point at hand about this morning being at Atlas, this is a family that runs a business like a family. This is just unbelievable. An American success story of a family that's been in the stationery business for 75 years and changed over the last 5 to 10 years with the younger blood coming in that adores pens, adores inks, adores papers, and most importantly, they and their employees, which are family members, they're not literally family members, they treat them like family members. This is a family that adores customers. So with that, fire away.
Yeah, they've referred to it in a post as a family block party, is the Atlas Sidewalk Sale. And it does definitely have that feel. Like it is a whole bunch of people getting together for a family block party.
And it was yesterday in the rain, because you know sometimes you can have a block party and the weatherman doesn't cooperate. And
it bucketed, it flooded.
It didn't diminish it. Even though my feet are a little bit wet this morning,
we had a great time.
it was unbelievable. So it's such a pleasure to be in Chicago.
When I say fountain pen, what pen do you think of?
I think of a medium fine, which is very strange in pen business.
Yeah.
Because that's a misnomer, but it's not. In our Sailor brand, we actually have a nib called medium fine because the designation is somewhere between medium and fine.
Yep.
And one of the key considerations when buying a fountain pen is always the nib width relative to your handwriting and having good penmanship so that you enjoy signing your name. Being able to find a perfect nib to be able to not close your loops, yet perhaps get a wider nib when you have the command of the pen so that you can enjoy the full experience of all the ink and the wet.
Yep. How did you get into pens?
Well, being spoiled as an independent sales broker, it was in late 1970s when we worked with, my brother and I worked with an importer of calligraphy supplies. And back then I remember joking that if it was on the cover of Newsweek, the business would still be small. Yet we were spoiled because our importer of calligraphy materials had a magical pen. My introduction, my first fountain pen, was called the Pelikan M12. And it was the most amazing pen at the time. Pelikan doesn't make it any longer.
No.
I remember when I sold the last 500 pieces and I cried. I called customers, I said there were no more. I said that the mold had broken, and that pen brought us into the pen business. And we've been in the pen business, our family business, SamPro, My brother and I have been in the pen business, yeah, since the late 70s, early 80s.
Well, you've answered what was your first pen. What was the nib size on it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Well, it was not an italic nib
Okay.
because you can't have a handwriting as bad as mine and use an italic nib.
Fair enough. What's your current daily driver?
What's my current daily driver? It's a Sailor,
Okay.
of course. But, you know, when you say daily driver, the thing that comes to mind that's, to me, fascinating about this hobby is that although these pens may be considered expensive, you can own so many of them because unlike sports cars, you don't have to build garages for them.
Yeah.
And by the way, this store has other accessories. So if you have 10 or 5 or 20 pens, as some of these pen lovers do, and they show their pens, you would just shake your head and be reminded that it's all part of it.
Yeah, I got 8 pens just yesterday. What's your favorite ink?
You know, I'm a foodie, okay? So if you ask me what my favorite food is, I can't tell you unless you start to narrow it down. Like, which meal, and is it savory or is it sweet? So when it comes to ink, it's what's your mood, and that's why it's great to have more than one pen. Because different pens with different nibs, with different fashion treatments, with different colors of ink. So that if you're writing a sincere note to someone, you may use a blue or a black or a blue-black. And yet when you want to be even more expressive and put a congratulation together or something for fun, you might use one of the bright colors, one of the shimmering colors, or sheening colors. Because when we talk inks here at Yoseka, I'm sorry,
Atlas.
at Atlas, I have a pen on my brain.
3 pen shows in a row.
Yeah, it's a lot. The thing is that this store has hundreds of bottles of ink. Hundreds, not hundreds like 50 of this and 50 of that. Hundreds of options. And there are binders with little cards, hand-made cards showing what each color's like and the properties. So I can't answer the question except to explain around it.
Fair enough. What's your favorite brand of either pens or ink?
It depends on my mood. Of course, I'm bent towards Sailor because we're with Sailor. Our family business represented Itoya, the Sailor distributor, for maybe 12 years. We relaunched Sailor. So, of course, my loyalties stay on where my heart is. And that's the thing about being in a passion about pens. Your heart, you know, it pumps different rates, and you can do different things with pens. So currently, yeah, it is Sailor.
Vintage or modern?
Both. My vintage pens are BC. That means before children. And after children, it's been more of the newer, great new pens, because the great thing about this collection, this great thing about this hobby, this great thing about this passion is the ability to know that every month there's going to be something new that's going to capture your attention and capture your heart.
Yeah. Do you swatch all your inks?
No. I also don't measure when I cook. I don't bake, by the way. I buy baked goods. But my cooking tends to be inspirational, and my inking tends to be inspirational. And there's nothing more inspirational at my desk to look at a pen that I'm thinking of using and thinking, what color do I want to write with today?
All right.
And you don't necessarily have to fill that pen up completely. You don't want to waste ink either. But you might only need a little bit of ink to make a communication.
No, I do a lot of half fills or empty things into sample vials if I get bored of a color.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of unlabeled sample vials of mystery ink that I've gotten bored of having in a pen.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any pens that you daily drive the same color of ink in?
Well, there's one Sailor that I use in particular, and I do like a shade of blue-black. Well, you might be able to tell, it's kind of like this blue in this shirt. I kind of like that.
Is it the Sailor blue-black ink?
Yes, it is.
I love my bottle of it.
And I'm going to show this later. I don't want to tease you now.
Do you keep your nib writing samples so you know how every pen writes, or do you just know how every pen writes?
I don't measure my cooking. I just pick it up and write.
All right. What's a pen you wish you could see in person? What pen do you wish you could see in person?
The great thing about being in this industry and being in this business and in this community is that I've gotten to see so many amazing pens. So I don't know if necessarily that there's one I have in mind. Because of my mind, I know my imagination is going to be broken.
All right.
There's going to be something new.
What's your current grail?
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
What's a pen you wish you could own but don't currently own?
Well, it's hard because I like to say that my favorite brand, of course, is Sailor, but I tend to own most Sailors that I love. That's a spoil of the business. I did see a Pelikan out there yesterday that did steal my heart, but being the generous person I am, I suggested to a customer here that had bought a Sailor already and that I had a conversation with, that pen, if he didn't buy it, I was going to buy it. And so he bought it, and he thanked Don and me afterwards. Don's the founder of Atlas. His sons run Atlas today.
Okay.
And he said, and he was talking about this pen, and Don thought, well, I wonder what Sailor Michael sold him. I said,
And you
no,
didn't
Don,
sell him a Sailor?
I sold him the pen that I wanted.
Well, that sometimes happens.
Absolutely.
What's a pen you would recommend to a beginner?
So I'm going to tell you right now, in 2024, there's an amazing pen from Sailor that's not 14 karat gold nib or 21 karat gold nib. It's a steel nib, and it is the absolute best beginner's pen. It's called 2Zoo. It's all new tooling. It's all new design, and it has a nib adjustment feature on it, so you can adjust how much of the nib feed you're holding. So you can customize your grip to the pen. And that's the best pen because that's going to get you success. And success will lead you to other pens. We've sold, it came out this summer, we've already sold thousands. And more important than that, wherever we go, people say, what a great pen. And 2Zoo, sells for about street price, mid $40 range. Mind you, Sailor pens are oftentimes in the hundreds and sometimes can go into the thousands. But a great pen company is a great company because it can create a pen that's the entry point for success.
What ink would you recommend to a beginner?
I tend to be clinical with that answer. I think it's important to be authentic and clinical. So I always suggest that the person try to match the brand pen to the brand of ink they start with.
Okay.
Because hopefully that company has done some good matching. And, you know, in the old days, we used to say that Quink ink from Parker was the best ink, and it was very dense. But if you put Quink ink from Parker back in the 80s into a pen that wasn't made to handle that viscosity, it clogged it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the ink that was bad, it was the match. So always the easiest way to do it is stay within the family.
What advice would you have for somebody wanting to try out fountain pens who might be intimidated by them?
That's a great question. So you see, the thing about that is the best place to start is by going into a brick and mortar store. The even better proposition is to go to a brick and mortar store where everyone's passionate and you're not fearful that you're going to be sold something. They're going to put the pen in your hand. They're going to talk to you about matching the size of the pen to the size of your hand. Like when you buy a pair of shoes, you buy a pair of shoes that fits on your foot. And then they're going to talk to you about the size of the nib and how that matches your handwriting. And there's nothing that equivocates to that. You can't do that online. And there aren't many independent stores and brick and mortar stores. Yet, at this event and at other recent events, what we're seeing, a mega trend with Instagram, with social channels where they are, people are traveling from far distances because they know what they're going to get. They're going to get a pen experience, and it's going to lead them to hopefully a passionate pursuit.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. So if you can find a great brick and mortar, look on Instagram, look on all the social channels, find where if they're gonna have a pen fair and travel to it. Last week in New York, I met a mother and daughter. The mother was going to buy her husband a pen. He's a pen fanatic a little bit. She was from Denver. We talked about pens, and she bought her husband a pen. And then I looked at her daughter and I said, "How many pens do you own?" And I said, "Will you admit that in front of your mother?" She was from San Francisco, and she was brutally honest. She said, "No, I will not tell my mother how many pens I have." Anyway.
What filling mechanism do you think is most interesting, regardless of if you like to use it or not?
Piston plunger.
All right. What nib size do you prefer to write with?
Now, because Sailor has this great medium fine, although Sailor has 27 different nibs, I'm not kidding you. We have nibs from master nib makers that make them bespoke style. Bespoke means one at a time. We have nibs that you can write correctly meaning stereotypically, like this. And the same pen, you can turn upside down.
Oh, you've got reverse nibs.
And you can reverse the size. So you can have a medium nib with an extra fine or a fine on the other side. So when you're doing careful writing, you're writing upside down. And when you want to be expressive with the signature, you're using the wider one.
Is there a style of nib you love or find interesting but would never actually write with?
There is not a nib that I've met that I can say that about. Because it's all about, it's like saying the same thing about wine. You know, is there a red wine that can you actually say that there's a red wine that you don't like? Anyway.
Do you always use the same paper? If so, what paper? If not, what's your favorite?
So let me just say on the subject of paper, because that's a wide subject also, that not all paper is meant for fountain pens. And if I was giving a general description of paper that I'd look for, it's paper that has a certain opacity that doesn't bleed through, and it has a certain brightness, and it has a certain smoothness. And so I tend to, when I'm buying paper, to rub my hand along it. And some people think I'm crazy when you take paper and you rub your hand on it, but this is what my life has been about. And so I tend to favor Japanese papers.
Okay.
There are some unbelievable Japanese papers.
There are.
That's in general.
I use MD paper from Midori. What is your least favorite ink or ink color family?
Yellows. I also don't really like pastels. If I have pastel inks, I tend to mix them and fool around a little bit.
That's the best part about inks, is like you can create your own colors.
Of course.
But don't mix multiple brands. Stay with the same brand. That's how you end up in trouble.
Yes. Well, and by the way, my hands are clean because I used really good soap this morning.
My hands are clean today too.
And let me tell you something about ink and your hands. When your hands are dirty, you've had a great day.
Yes. My rule for Mom coming to a pen show, there were 2 rules. Always twist a pen before you try and pull off the cap.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're unsure, ask. Don't pull a lid. And the number 2 thing is that she had to get over having ink on her fingers. She was going to get messy. She had to get over it. Those are my 2 rules for a pen show for a mom.
That's a great thing to share with a mom. The camera person here is the mom. Just telling you, she may want to hide behind the camera. She's not doing the selfie version. But just know that that's the steady hands you're seeing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for playing 20 questions.
Thank you. And keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're sharing your passion. And that's what this is all about.
All right.